Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Into the Terminal. I will be joined by my co-host Nate, who we see there already. And today we're going to be covering text editors, which is the source of many very heated conversations about which one is the best one.
What do you mean text editors? There's only one.
Well, let's just dive into the terminal, and we'll see our first one, which is not Nate's favorite. All right.
I think we have the wrong terminal. There we go.
All right, so the first editor that we're going to cover today is, in my opinion, the simplest text editor to use. And it's one that often needs to be installed from the Red Hat repos because it's not included in the base install for a lot of things. Nate, you know which editor that is?
Yeah, it's pretty much everybody's first editor. I would say I would wager, right, that this is probably most people's first experience command line editing on Linux, unless you got started a very long time ago, like we did.
Right.
But
So
even myself, right,
Nano,
the predecessor to Nano was Pico or Pico. That's what I got started with. So
yeah. So Nano is a very small text editor. And so you invoke it by saying Nano and the name of the file you want to edit, like that. And it brings up the contents of the file. And the reason why it's most people's first editor is that stripped down at the bottom. So when you're working with text editors, you have a text interface, right? So there's not like a click pull down, file save, or copy and paste. You're reliant on issuing commands inside of the editor using your keyboard to do different text editing tasks. And so the reason that Nano is usually people's first is because down there at the bottom strip, that's the list of commands. So if
right,
I need to exit, I control X, right? Or if I need to cut a line, it's control K. Or paste a line is control U. So we can use the arrow keys to move around the file. And so
and
maybe
you
my server.
You might ask why it doesn't follow the usual conventions that most GUIs do. Control C, Control X, Control V, because those are mapped to other things in the terminal. So poor Nano had to make do.
Right, and maybe we want
Control
to.
X might kill the session, for example.
So we said cut. So control K will cut, and control P. I'm sorry, control U will paste back in. Right. So you use those control carrots, that caret in front of the key identifier as a control. So it's control
Right.
and the other thing pressed together perform the thing. And then the other thing we see is M in a character. So like maybe I incorrectly run a command like control K, control K, control K, and I want to undo it. So MU is the meta character U, which is actually escape M. Oops. Escape U. Man, escape U. Maybe it only undoes one thing.
Seems like maybe it does.
There we go. I got it now.
Oh,
Working with gas now. So
yay!
control U. Man, escape U.
Escape,
Meta is
escape you.
escape. But you have to keep them both pressed at the same time. So you press escape and hold it, and then click U to do that command.
Which is it's sort of a weird key combo if you think about it, because escape's way up over there, right? It's almost like a two-hander.
Yeah.
So, but you only got so much keyboard real estate, right? So it's hard to come up with
So
key combinations that aren't gonna break other things.
yeah, and Nano supports things like the arrow keys, so you can
Hmm.
use the arrow keys to move up and down and all around in the file where you want to make edits. And when you've made all of your changes to the file, it's time to save the file. So what we're going to do is Control X to exit. So press Control and then press X. And so what it's asking you as you're exiting is, do you want to save this file? So if you hit Y to save it, then whatever you just changed inside of your editor will replace the file out in your file system. If you hit N, you'll abandon all the changes that you've made in this session of the editor. So do you want to persist the changes you've made this file into the file, or do you want to quit out? So I'm going to say yes. And then since I said yes, I want to save it, it doesn't just automatically write it to the file that was its source. It asks you, what file do you want to write it to? The default is the file you opened with the editor. So if I just hit enter, that'll save it to this file name. But you could also go in and change the file name to store it somewhere else to not overwrite the source file.
Right.
So maybe I
Just
call
by
it.
just by typing a different name there, which is handy.
There we go. I'm going to call it. Let's see, http conf.1.
Very creative naming scheme.
Yes. Yeah, I know. I
Yeah, we
work
should have a
professionally. All right.
.1.
So, yep. So there's the one I just saved with all of my changes in it, and then I left the original one alone because I chose not to overwrite it with my edited changes. But that's something that you can
Right.
choose as you're leaving the editor. Do you want to overwrite the file that exists in the file system with my changes, or do you want to save those changes somewhere else? It's up to you. So I think that wraps up our critical path for covering Nano. But don't forget to like the video if you want us to keep producing into the terminal. And if you're interested in being notified when we are doing more episodes or scheduled things, thanks to producer Eric, you can subscribe and you can get notifications when we're doing things.
Yeah, yeah.
On the other side of the transition, we're going to talk about some additional text editors. So Nate, I know you're going to tell us about your favorite text editor,
I don't
which
know what
is
you're
what?
talking about. Of course, we're going to talk about Vim
Right. And then we'll
and
touch
those
base on.
others.
Yeah, there's a couple others. The traditional Unix war of opinion is Emacs versus Vim. Unfortunately, you're underrepresented on the Emacs side here today because
Yeah.
both Nate and I
Look,
are Vim.
I tried to make a demo for Emacs, but unfortunately, that lab is still stuck in the editor. I can't figure out how to quit. So,
We'll also talk about a couple others that maybe you haven't seen before, or um, have things like text-based IDEs for developers. So join us after the transition as we go into more depth on text editors. Nate, so
welcome
we're going
back.
to talk a little bit more depth. So before we actually go into VI, which is I think where we're going to spend a lot of time talking about what we do in VI and things we like in VI, we did want to spend a little bit of time talking about other editors. So Nate, what are some other editors that we've got available to us?
So, I mean, of course, we already mentioned Emacs, of course. Emacs is a very versatile editor. I will say that. I had my old boss loved Emacs to the point where he was getting like strain in his pinky from hitting the control key. So he got a foot pedal. So, any editor that requires a foot pedal seems a bit convoluted to me. But if you like Emacs, it's great. Like there's lots you can do with it. Lots of plugins and integrations and whatever, but it's a little heavyweight for me. I don't know. I guess it's just not the path I took, right? When I chose to learn a difficult editor, I learned Vim instead of Emacs.
So, and we were talking about this as we are coming up with the idea for the show, and I told Nate and Eric my story of Emacs, which is I was a VI user, and back then it wasn't VI improved; it was just VI. So it lacked a lot of features that more modern editors all have. So my manager at the time was like, "Look, you're writing a lot of code. I think if you used Emacs, which had code highlighting and automatic indentation and some other things, that you would write better code." And I was like, well, Maybe, but I like VI because I know what I'm doing." And he's like, "Well, how about this? If you use Emacs every day for a month and you do not use VI at all, at the end of that month, if you're not convinced that Emacs is the best editor, I will not ask you to change again." Anyway, so here we are today where I use VI.
I think it would have been interesting if you could have somehow gotten metrics out of your proficiency, right? Or I should say your productivity when you were using Emacs versus Vim. Although I guess there was a learning curve at the beginning, so maybe it wouldn't have been accurate.
Yeah, and that's actually something else to point out when we start delving into these other editors like VI and Emacs. Right, one of the reasons why Nano is the first is because it tells you all your commands, right? Whereas these
Yeah.
others, you get to memorize the commands to move
Yep.
around and
Or
run
you can
changes.
buy this cool mug which
Or,
has the the VI quick reference printed on the outside of it.
or there are several quick reference documentation, or you can get there's a couple of O'Reilly books. Like,
But it's better when it's on your mug.
well, um, so we're going to delve a little bit deeper into VI in
Yeah.
just a bit, but
But there were
there are
other
some other
editors on
editors
this
too.
list. We got stymied on Emacs. There's Joe, which I haven't used. Have you've used Joe, I assume?
I
I
have.
hope, because I
I'm not
haven't.
proficient at it, but it's
Yeah.
another kind of small text editor, and that's the goal: is that it is a small text editor that doesn't have a lot of overhead associated with it. So there's not a lot of processor overhead. There's also not a ton of um, dependencies that are required to install it. So that's why people that I know that use Joe, and it does have some things like code highlighting and a few other modern editor features too.
It's handy. And then of course there's Nano that we just covered. Again, Nano's kind of like everybody's first editor. A lot of distributions use that as the default editor. So when you do a thing that calls up an editor, it'll bring up Nano. On RHEL, that is Vim. It'll come up with Vim, right? So good luck if you don't know how to use Vim. But maybe after watching this show, you'll have a better idea how to use it. Then, of course, there's Vim, which is our favorite. We've talked about quite a bit. There's Vim, I don't know, has a very long history. I mean, it might be a 30-year-old editor. I don't know, maybe longer. But it was developed back in like the terminal days. I don't mean terminal like SSH terminal. I mean like VTT terminal, right? And it
Yeah.
was designed to be usable without arrow keys, without a number pad, because you didn't necessarily have all of those things. You'd move around with letters instead of the arrow keys, and there were command sequences to do all the things, right? And then, of course, there's Vim, which is VI improved. VI is like the visual editor, is what VI stands for. I think that's just VI is visual, right? And VIM or Vim is the visual improved editor. So, it's better somehow. Vim includes like the ability to add plugins and syntax highlighting and auto indentation and a whole bunch of extras that VI didn't necessarily have. You have anything to
Yep.
say about VI? I'm sure you
Uh,
do.
I do, but I'm going to hold it until we go deeper into VI. How about that?
Yeah. Okay. And then now we're talking mostly about terminal editors, but I feel like we'd be remiss not to mention that if you are in a graphical environment, even on Linux, VS Code ain't bad. Like it's a good. I personally think it's a good IDE, right? And considering the fact that it comes from Microsoft and it's still free, right? Like if anyone's used Visual Studio, you know that that's a big behemoth of an application. It's Windows only. VS Code is like a slimmed down VS or Visual Studio, and it works really well. I think extensible and pluggable and all those things. I use it on Mac, I've used it on Fedora, and I've used it in Windows, and it's great on all three.
And can you use VS Code in a terminal?
I don't know that you can. I never have. I don't know if you can or not, but that is definitely a graphical editor. But I think it's worth. I just think it's worth mentioning because a lot of people might not consider it if they're used to working in a terminal. I've done a lot of lines of code in Vim, so it certainly can be used that way, especially if you don't have a graphical environment to use. But VS Code is great if you have a graphical environment.
Great. And I'm sure there's even more editors too. I know that we run into some that
Absolutely.
are like, Notepad-esque, and so there's tons and tons and tons of other ones. But the ones that come with RHEL are Nano, Vim, which, as Nate pointed out, is the default, and Emacs. And then ones like Joe are provided via the extra packages for Enterprise Linux repository. And you'll probably find a few other ones out there too
Right.
in EPUL.
There's also a graphical version of Vim now that I think about it. GVim, I think
GVim.
it's called. Yeah. So if you like graphical environments, I mean, it's basically just Vim, graphical window, but I think it has menus to help you out if you can't figure out the key commands.
I mean, this is why we need to have servers with GUIs, Nate, so you can use your GVim.
No, no. I mean, maybe I'll let it pass if you do like X forwarding or something, but no servers with GUIs.
All right. So why don't we delve a little bit further into VI, Nate? You want
Sure,
to take us into a file and kind of describe how you work in VI?
sure. Let's see. So, I don't know where to start, right? So we've got a list of a bunch of interesting commands that I have used frequently in Vim, and we're just going to kind of show a couple of those. So first, let me just open up a file, something that's not going to hurt the system at all, like I don't know, Etsy password. Dive right in. So right away you can see the color highlighting, which I really think is handy. This isn't code, but if it were, there would also be the ability to do automatic indentations and whatnot, which I think is really handy in just a normal text editor. However, they're sometimes really frustrating. There's a paste mode that you can put Vim into by hitting colon and then the word set paste, right? And what that'll do is probably can't see it. Looks like you can't see it at the bottom of the term. Oh, wait. I'm getting a note here that I should resize my terminal. That is true. I don't know why. There. How about that?
That
Now
works.
we can see it. Can you see the bottom? Can you see the command line?
Yep, we're all good.
Okay, there we go. Okay. Sorry, let me get back to where I was. So if you did set paste, and I mean, I've already jumped into something and made an assumption that maybe people watching don't know. This is the command interface with Vim. So if I hit escape, I'm back into like normal, I can move around mode. If I hit escape and then a colon, it will bring me into command mode. And in there, I can issue commands that will do things, right? Now, this isn't the same as the commands you do in visual mode, which is here, right? I know this is really super intuitive, but trust me, it all makes sense.
So,
But if I
so
hit,
Nate, on that theme, so this
yeah,
is where we get a little bit of VI history.
yeah,
So VI was actually made from several different editors, and it was made to support several different editors' command structures. And so what
right,
you're
okay,
looking at when you started with a colon and you get that little command line at the bottom of your editor window, that is an X editor command. EX is the name of the editor. And so there's a bunch of things that you could do, like saving and quitting or setting a parameter that
right,
happens on that X editor command line that starts with a colon.
right,
Then there's other commands, and Nate referred to them as visual commands, where you type things and stuff happens inside of the file that you're editing. And those are likely ed editor commands. So things like moving around or copy and pasting. So what ended up happening was VI was created. It imported the lexicon of commands from both of these other line editors that are around, and then it also implemented some things that are its very own, like capital Z is a VI only command. But anyway, non sequitur Unix history. Back to you, Nate.
It's helpful background though, because I always kind of wondered why they weren't all integrated. I always figured it was just because they needed the extra command space, but that actually makes a lot more sense. It was because there were two separate sets of commands and they didn't want to interfere with each other. So that makes sense. So as Scott was saying, if you hit colon, you can issue commands And in fact, there's a vimrc file that you can either define system wide or per user, which uses the exact same commands. So if I wanted to like change the color scheme, for example, if I knew the name of a different color scheme, I could just type colors and then the name of the color scheme that I wanted to use. If I want to set parameters about how Vim behaves, I can do them right here. But that's what I was talking about by set paste, right? So set paste puts it into paste mode. So if I were to copy and paste things into the terminal, it won't make any assumptions about auto indentations, right? But if I am not in paste mode, then it will auto indent things that I try to paste in or things that I try to type, right? So that's just an example of things you can do sort of on the fly, right? But what I wanted to show, there is, Scott, I forget the command to execute a shell command, but from within Vim, in that
It's
command mode, you
colon
can,
exclamation point
just
and
like
then the
that, and
command that you
then,
want. Yep.
right. So there we go. It'll show you stuff outside. Now, I've actually participated in a capture the flag contest where this was how you got shell. So this is a thing you need to be aware of and a thing you need to know about if you're in an environment where you're giving people like limited access to editors and things. You can actually execute commands from within Vim. So keep that in mind. Don't run Vim as root. All right. So
There's actually like for sudoers, that's why we include things like no forking, because that'll keep those behaviors from happening in your application.
there you go. All right, some other ones that I like. There is the yank command, which is sort of like I think it's the copy command, right? Yes, YY will put things into the clipboard. Now you can't see that I just typed YY. I should have put one of those like type keyboard command capture things on the screen, but that puts it into like the key into the clipboard with the memory within Vim. Now, if I go to like the end of the file here, I'm just going to go a couple lines below. If I hit the letter P, it will paste in what I yanked, right? Which I think is really handy. This way, you don't have to like grab your mouse, select a thing, and then copy it to your machine's clipboard and then paste it back in, right? This is all within Vim. It's all within the clipboard that Vim handles. Similarly, you can delete a whole line with two Ds, DD. That just deletes the whole line. But then if you're like, oh crap, I wanted to either put that back or I wanted to put it somewhere else, you just hit P again. It's the line that you deleted is also put into the clipboard. So if you hit P, whatever you just deleted, you can put back. So if it's like, oh, I wanted this Flatpak line to be further up in the file, I go up here and hit P, and there it is, right? So that's handy for moving things around. I think you can do that with several lines at a time, too. I'm kind of hopping around my list here. This is one of my really favorite commands. If you hit Control V, you can do a visual block. And then you can see how it's highlighting the first letter of each line there. And now if I did the DD again, it should delete all those lines. Did it delete them all? Oh, no, it just deleted the first letter. So never mind. It doesn't. I don't think DD works for that.
Well, I guess we're going to learn about undo.
Yeah, well, U, the letter U is undo, right? Which is another handy command. You also saw me make a new line before. If I want to make a new line after the one I'm on, just a letter O. If I want to make a new line before the one I'm on, capital O. Oops, not in insert mode. It also puts you in insert mode as soon as you do that. And that's something I totally glossed over, insert mode. If I type here, it's going to think that these are commands. If I hit the letter I, it puts me into insert mode. You can see it at the bottom. It says insert. And now I can actually type. And this is like the number one thing that confuses people when they open up Vim. Okay, I've got the file open, but I type things and it's doing weird stuff. Why am I not actually typing, right? Well, it's because you have to hit the letter I first. And then to leave it, you just hit escape and it takes you back to visual mode. I went all over the place here. Did I cover all? Oh,
You
G.
did. Let me just
Sorry.
reaffirm what you said there about command mode and insert mode. So when you
Yeah.
open a file for the first time, you are in command mode of VI, which means every character you type is being interpreted by VI as a command to tell it to do something to the contents of that editor. So if you actually want to type stuff into your file, you have to switch from command mode to insert mode. And so that's where you hit the I command to move into
Mm-hmm.
insert mode. And there are a couple of other ways to do that too. Nate showed us the O command that opens a line and puts you into insert mode as a combined action. But with VI improved, there's that little insert flag down at the bottom. So Nate, if you could throw us into insert mode, we'll see that. Right. So now everything Nate's typing is actually stuff that goes into this editor. And as he is finished typing, he will hit the escape key, which will convert him back into the command mode. You notice when he converts back, that little insert flag goes away. And
Yep.
now when he starts typing, everything he's typing is a command that tells VI to do something to this content.
Right. Right. All right. The next one I wanted to talk about was G, capital G. If I'm in a file, no matter what line I'm on, I hit the capital G, it'll take me to the end of the file. Takes you to the last line. If I want to go to a specific line, if I want to go to like line 10, I think it's the number 10 and then G. Here I am on line 10. And you can see at the bottom, I don't know if it's blocked by our camera. It's not. You can see at the lower right of the screen, it shows me 10 comma 1. That means I'm on line 10, first character. And the 30% is how far through the file I am. So instead of having a scroll bar, you have a percentage, right? If I move down, you can see it's like that 30% will increase as we scroll down. Now it says I'm at the bottom, or I found a bot. I'm not sure. I think that's at the bottom. I'm at the bottom. A lot of these commands will, I said about a number and then G, right? A lot of these commands, you can specify a number and then the command, and it'll do the command that many times. So if I wanted to delete 10 lines, if I do 10 dd, boom, 10 lines are gone. If I hit U for undo, it'll put them back, right? If I wanted to delete the next 10 characters, if I do 10 D and then the direction I want to delete in, it'll delete 10 characters in the direction that I did. If I want to delete one character in a direction, D and then that direction. If I go like way over here and go D in the other direction, you can see it's deleting one thing. What if I do D up? Does it delete the line above? It does. I'm deleting entire lines at a time there. Let's see.
And
What else
I
did I
mentioned
want to
that there's
show?
multiple ways of doing the same exact thing.
Yeah.
So D in something is the VI way of deleting things. The
Right.
the ed editor way is the X command. So X deletes one character, and a 10X would delete 10 characters. Um,
Right.
so there's often more than one way to do something in VI. And the reason I bring that up is because uh, we started talking about how for text editors outside of Nano that tells you all the commands, you have to learn commands. And what I found is that to be minimally proficient in VI, it's about 15 commands. But what's crazy is my 15 commands and Nate's 15 commands are different.
Right.
And there will be some overlap on them. We're actually putting together our list. And so he was talking about O to open a new line and go into insert mode. That's one of my 15 too.
Mm-hmm.
Or U to undo or P to paste. Those are part of my 15 as well. But Nate, what do you use to move around in your file?
I just use my arrow keys.
Yeah. And I use H, J, K, and L, the traditional VI movement characters, because they allow me to not take my hands off the home row of the keyboard. I'm a touch
Right.
typist. And H, K, J, and L in command mode will move you around left, up, down, and right.
That is
Right.
handy. That is handy.
Um,
All right.
left,
So I
down,
was talking
up.
about visual blocks, and the example I used before wasn't all that great. So I'm going to use a better one. If I do Control V and then select a bunch of things, if I want to add, say I want to comment all these lines, if I hit Shift I, which is insert mode, but insert at the beginning of the line, and there's another one for insert at the end of the line. I forget what it is. But Shift I will say insert at the beginning of the line. And you notice my visual block went away, but it's in insert mode now. Now, if I do a pound sign, you can see it only put it on the one line. So you might think, well, it didn't actually do the thing. But as soon as I hit escape, it repeats it on all the lines that I had in the visual block, right? And you can do crazy things like make columns with the visual block and move up a block. Like if I do Control V and go over and down, you can see I can select a whole bunch of rows and columns at the same time, right? So you can do a bunch of different things like that. You can also do things like indent lines. If I have all of these selected, and I think it's bracket. There we go. Not bracket. It's the less than sign. that'll move in all those lines. You can do that with one line as well, right? I don't have the block anymore. If I want to move in just, oops, I hit the wrong button. Move just this line, it'll move just that line, right? So that's handy, right? You say like, oh, I didn't nest my if statement. Select the whole thing with Control V and then dent it in, and you're good. Sorry, my dog wants to be part of the stream today. I don't know if you can hear her in the background.
So Nate, did we cover your favorite commands?
I think we did. I wanted to just kind of show you, right? I just totally borked my Etsy password file by deleting and moving and everything, right? If I hit the letter U a bunch of times, it'll go through the whole history and undo everything I've done. Or if I just hit colon Q for quit and then an exclamation point. The exclamation point is my favorite command, I think, in Vim, which means do it anyway. I don't care if I'm going to lose my changes. I don't care if it's a read-only file. If you have super user permissions, you can write to a read-only file using bang by hitting W bang, right? So Q, exclamation point, will quit and not save my changes. So now I am back to my command line. And if I reopen Etsy Password, you see it's back to my nice, sane, contents that it would have been at the beginning. All right. Did you have some you wanted to show as well? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So I do a couple other things in VI. One is I use the colon exclamation point command escape pretty often because I'll do things like in my configuration file for the service, for example, like maybe I'm going to search with a / in command mode for listen, and then I'm going to use N to advance the cursor to the next instance of the term I'm looking for, and I'm going to change it to 80. Let's say, 80. And I could save and quit and then go back to my command line and do stuff, or I could just do colon exclamation point systemctl restart httpd. Oh, well, I should probably save it first. Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Right. And
That's
then,
actually pretty handy. I would normally have a second terminal window open, but if you're at a console, for example, can't really do that.
all right. So it's done, and when I hit enter, it has run the command and put me back into the editor. Now, the reason I started this workflow back in the day was we didn't have necessarily multiple terminals easily available.
Right.
And so I would be editing my C program, but now I got to compile it and run it. So I'd save it and then exclamation point compile. And when that was done, exclamation point run it. And I would see the output on the interface. And then I could return back to my editor to make further changes. Or more likely the case, I would compile it and there'd be a whole pile of error messages about like missing stuff or wrong type. And then I could go back in and like make those changes and recompile it again.
I
So
don't need to
that was
debug my
how
code compiler for that.
Exactly. All right. So I use search, that / in command mode in a term a lot because it allows me to find things in my really huge files really easily. But one of the annoying things about using search is that it leaves that last search term highlighted.
Yes.
And if I actually leave the editor and come back, it's still highlighted. Super annoying. So I will often find myself, especially when I have too broad a search term, doing a colon no HL.
There you go.
So that disables my highlighting, no highlighting. Let's see.
There's a way to like turn off the highlight without disabling it. I forget what it is though. I always just search for something that I know doesn't exist. Then the highlight goes away.
That's what no HL does, right? If I do a search again for...
If you search again, will it highlight again?
That's not in here. How about SS? Right, it'll highlight again.
Oh, okay. Okay. Right. I thought you had turned off highlighting. I get it. So that is the command I'm looking for. Okay.
Yeah, colon no HL. And like Nate, I often use the multiplier for a command. So if I wanted to delete this block of this listen block, What is that? I don't know. It's like 10 lines, 10 DD.
Yeah.
Nope, nope. It's 12 lines, 12 DD. Um, and so using that numeric multiplier for the command you're going to type, I use that all the time. I also use it for movement. So you could do like a 500J. It'll take you 500 lines down. Nate was
Yep.
using it with, I think, G.
Well, that'll
So,
take you to a
and then the other,
specific line. If you wanted to go to line
so
500, you do 500G, it takes you to that line.
So for my move to a line, because as it's talking about compiling, right, it usually tells you there's an error and the line it's on.
Yeah.
So you can colon 20. That takes you to line 220. So just
Oh,
colon
that's
and a
easier than
number
using
takes
G.
you that line.
To be honest, I use
Uh,
G more frequently to get to the end of a file. Capital G takes you to the end, period.
oh, so you know what I use for that? Colon dollar.
See that?
Because
They're
in
all
the
different. Did you
dollar
know when you open Vim, right? If you do Vim, a file name, and then do a plus and then a number, it'll take you directly to that line when it opens.
huh, did not know
See?
that.
No matter how long you've been using Vim, you talk to another Vim user, you learn something.
That's right. And that's where I was going with this thing, right? Like my 15 commands that I have found to be uh, really awesome may
Shantanu just said the
differ,
same thing in the chat.
right? And the other thing is like, so let's say to be minimally proficient, you need 15. To
Right.
be really good at VI, you know how many commands you need?
128. It's got to be.
It's about 30.
Yeah.
Like to do all kinds of stuff, you need about 30 commands.
Yeah.
So the differential between like being barely proficient to being VI ninja is not that far apart.
Right.
So and that like extra 15 that takes you to VI ninja, that's where a lot of the divergence between users comes in. So
Yeah.
like,
And the good news is there's a quick reference, the same one that's on my mug. Um, in Vim, you do like colon quick ref, and it just opens up the quick reference so that you can then see the list of things. You don't have to have it printed. You don't have to have a book. It's right there within Vim, so it's really handy. So you can find, what was the command again for yanking 3 lines? Oh, it's right there. Okay.
you know what we didn't cover, Nate? We covered quitting without saving. We didn't cover quitting and saving.
Right. Right. I thought maybe you would in your examples, but you didn't.
Well, let's get back in there and save it then. All right. So I'm going to escape to make sure that I'm in command mode. And then I'm going to colon EQ. That will write my changes to disk and quit. When we were doing this with Nano, it'd ask you a bunch of questions, right? Like, do
Yep.
you want to save a file? Which file do you want? VI, however, like does what you tell it. So if you
Yep.
say write and quit, it's going to write the file you opened with the stuff. So if you want to write something different, you have to
Colon X to
tell
save and quick. Yes.
it, and then it would write and quit, and it'll uh, save the file and exit.
Right.
Yep, and Eric in chat is saying colon X. That's his command for save and quit. It takes place of
Yep.
WQ. So yeah, always more stuff.
So one thing
So
we could probably spend another half hour talking about that we didn't touch on was search and replace. You can do a search, right? You showed a search, but you can also do search and replaces on individual lines, on the entire file, on every instance of a search result in every line, and it'll do regex for the replacements. So you can get crazy. I mean, it'll do regex for the search and for the replacement, for that matter. So you can get really crazy. What's the word I'm looking for? You can get a lot of depth in the things you can do with search and replace, right? So there's no more like, I have to, I don't know. I've used it to do things like I need to add a comma to the end of all my lines, right? You can do stuff like that. Or, I need to replace the word and, right? Through the whole file, whatever it is, right? And you can do a lot of crazy stuff like that. Or I need to change the case of a word, right? So anything you can do with regex, you can do with search and replace in Vim. It's pretty crazy. Changing IPs, that's a good example, Eric. If you get like a CSV and you want to make it line separated instead of comma separated, you can replace the commas with line breaks. Pretty handy. So
Nate, we're out of time. So
we
I
are
know that you're really sad that you haven't been able to install the 176 dependencies in order to run Emacs on your machine.
147. I did it just
Oh,
before to see what the number was. 147.
um, so Emacs is another text editor. Um, it uses a command syntax um, more similar to Nano, where you hit Control and a character or Escape and a character, and it has a huge list of commands that you can use as well. But like VI, you just kind of have to learn them and know them. And also like
Right.
VI, you have to learn a certain number to be minimally proficient in it, and then probably the same amount again to be a Emacs wizard. Um, we are not going to cover Emacs because we're at time.
Yeah,
But
I've
no,
I've spent almost no time in Emacs in my entire IT career, so I couldn't.
yeah, well,
I
that
think opening
you
it
were.
today and exiting a file is the most I've done in Emacs ever. So
I mean, honestly, a lot of that is because you grew up in an era where VI improved was there, and let me just
yeah,
tell you, original VI, there was no insert flag to tell you whether you were insert mode or command mode. You just had to type
yeah,
and find out.
hmm
Or, like I said, Emacs had syntax highlighting and auto indentation, a variety of other features that VI did not. It also had the ability, like Tmux, to split windows. So you could actually have multiple terminals or multiple sessions open at the same time via Emacs. And VI had no such capability. So,
right,
um, like 25 years ago, there were a lot of cool things that you could do with Emacs that you could not do with VI. Just straight up
right.
could not do with VI.
It's just
And
improved
VI
over the years.
has closed a lot of those gaps.
I originally learned Vim or VI because it was at the point in my career where I was starting to interview for jobs, and I wanted to be a Linux systems administrator. And I think I went for a job interview, and they had asked me questions about how to use Vim, and I didn't know. And I think that was part of what didn't get me the job, which might sound surprising, but in that era, right, it was like, well, this guy's not going to be productive because he doesn't know how to use Vim. We're going to have to teach him that, right? So yeah, I learned it just so I could start getting like so I could answer those questions on interviews. It may not be as important today as it was then.
Well, we have talked about VI a lot today because clearly Nate and I are passionate about our editor of choice. Um, Next week, we'll come up with something else interesting to do. I don't know what that's going to be
Yeah,
yet.
maybe we'll lock Nate in Emacs and see what he can do.
And then make fun of him the entire time.
Yeah, right. That sounds like a fun show, doesn't it?
I think we've been talking with Eric, and I think we're going to be doing some five best or five favorite, like those types of
Right.
episodes coming up. So um,
Five
we
favorite
will
editors.
get it
VI,
together.
Vim.
We'll, we'll get it put together and published, and Eric will schedule it so you guys will get some notifications if you're a subscriber.
Yeah.
To
Make sure you hit the
those.
bell, otherwise you won't know. You'll be walking in completely blind on Friday.
Next week, I believe, is RHEL Presents. And if it's not, it'll be the week after that. But Eric and uh,
I think I'm
Brian,
on it next week.
okay. You guys
I
are going to
better
be doing
check my calendar.
your images with Image Builder, if you didn't already
Unless that
know.
got moved. I don't know.
All right. But yeah, so great to have you. Thanks for tuning in, all of you that stayed this long. Um, love the VI. Nate, parting
Yeah,
words.
absolutely. Color codes. I mean, there's a bunch of them. Go find one you love and set it on all your systems, like the syntax highlighting.
So from us here at Red Hat, happy into the terminaling, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Yep. Have a great one.